Yeah, hi folks. Yes, Ardern is a compulsive liar, and she's good at it. Now, the other day, Barry Soper interviewed her, and he asked her some really relevant, pointed questions, and she lied and deflected all the way through it, to a point where democracy actually became the health of our water.
Prime Minister, thank you for joining me. For a start, can you tell me your definition of democracy?
Making sure that everyone has a say, Barry.
Now, that's her first lie right there. She doesn't believe that at all.
Is it an equal say?
Look, of course, in all of our electoral institutions, that's what it's built around, yes.
But then many are not having an equal say these days. When you see Māori co-governance, for example, you see the appointees to the Canterbury Regional Council, the Ngāi Tahu, unelected, having the same say as elected representatives, and that's just one example of many.
Well, I think what point you're actually making here...
Now shut up, Barry, and let me tell you what point you're actually making here.
And is correct, is that for some years now, we've had a number of different institutions, usually local, often dealing with, regional issues, where we have had mana whenua involved in the ongoing management of those issues for the benefit of every community member.
For the benefit of everyone.
So that's not a new concept, and in fact, if you're looking, for instance, at the protecting the health of our waterways, that's...
So protecting the health of our waterways is now democracy.
Actually being a common place for those kinds of arrangements
already. It's a
good
place to bring up, because some people would say that essentially that's stacked to give Māori more say, equal say, but control over the entities that were set up under the statements under Te Mana o Te Wai.
Well, what I would dispute is what you're claiming is that there is some kind of ownership that is directly attributed.
It's not ownership, it's say. They have to be bound by what mana whenua says.
Well, again, we've been over some of these discussions a few times before, but what I come back to is the fact that for our water entities, ultimately the reason for these reforms is to make sure that ratepayers don't experience an increase.
Why do Māori have so much say?
If I can finish. Ultimately, the goal is to make sure that we don't see an increase in rates bills or water bills for communities, and that we get out of the situation where we currently, for instance, have people on boil water notices. Now, if you're reforming the way then that those structures are organised, you create a management system, in this case regional representative groups, where people will be able to ensure that the focus of the community and the voice of the community is heard, and that's where you've got a role for mana whenua.
The entities you're setting up give iwi the final say. If they say something in the legislation, then that has to be enacted.
Well, actually, the way they're organised is around consensus building.
No, they're not around consensus building at all. If Maori have the final say, it's a dictatorship.
Because ultimately, and this is the reason why you haven't seen issues to date, local government, who have not opposed the arrangements for these structures, local government are already working in this way. They work with consensus. It's not about one group vetoing the other. They work on a consensus basis to make sure, simply, we have strong water infrastructure, low rates, and clean water to drink.
Here she goes on again about water. Democracy is all about water.
See, the Three Waters has now had its final reading, so it only needs the Governor-General's assent. It has. What people would say is that this is not democracy. The government hasn't taken the people along with it. When you consider 88,000 submissions were made and fewer than 300 were heard by the select committee. Is that democracy?
Well, I think that...
Now that was a yes-no question. Answer the question.
If you went out to New Zealanders and said, Should we stand by in a situation we've been presented with information that says some people will face increases in bills that could be as high?
We've had that argument, but is this democracy when the minority of people, under 20%, supported the Three Waters legislation, and yet it's going through?
I don't agree with your summation of that.
Well, it's a poll that was taken.
We never take, for instance, solely Select Committee submissions as being a singular indication of support, for a range of reasons, and you'd know why. But Barry, I absolutely believe that if New Zealanders saw the information that we have as a government that says if we do nothing, they will be lumbered with massive bills, it would not have been good leadership on our part to do nothing.
Why don't the council see that?
Well, I think actually one of the things we've raised is actually council have agreed that we do need to do something.
No, they haven't. It was forced on them. It was mandated by Mahuta.
The opportunity to do this change will deliver legacy benefits for New Zealand, and I'm pleased that we're able to make this decision today. Happy to take questions. One at a time. We'll start over here.
Minister, this was originally a...
Sorry, I'll just take one question.
Exactly, Minister, how you intend to have the councils participate in the all-in model that you've referred to, and will that be done through mandating legislation?
Councils will be able to reflect their views through the working group that will be established, and as a part of our proactive release of information, we have summarised much of the feedback that's come to us over the 8-week period. That working group will lift up the common themes that have concerned the sector in the way that this reform is framed.
Will there be a mandate in the legislation? I mean, the working group, you're talking about governance and accountability. How is ownership addressed? Because the councils have very vocally expressed their views, some of them. How will that be dealt with in the legislation? Will it be mandated? How do you get the councils on board?
Well, we've always said to councils through this process, because it is a public ownership model, that while they own their assets, debt and liability individually, the new model will enable them to co-own assets across the entity, and will require legislation to achieve that.
And will require legislation to achieve that. Now, that wasn't the only thing this communist dictator did.
It is also part of local authorities' responsibilities to establish and maintain processes to provide opportunities for Māori to contribute to the decision-making processes of their local authority. Māori wards are one way they can do this. Earlier this year, an amendment to the Local Electoral Act 2001 was passed to prevent binding polls from being held on whether councils should have Māori wards or Māori constituencies. The poll provisions had proven to be an unfair barrier to improving the democratic representation of Māori interests.
But they were democratic, including for Maori. But no, Mahuta wanted privileged treatment for Maori. Now here's a classic example of problems of undemocratic Maori wards.
To upset and outraged locals will take to the streets of Dargaville shortly following the new Mayor's karakia ban. In a recent council meeting, Mayor Craig Jepson stopped new Māori ward councillor Pera Paniora from starting with a karakia. Here's what happened in her words.
On the 30th of November, I was repeatedly denied the ability to say the karakia, which was really disappointing, and it was quite humiliating as well.
This is a council which is full of people who are non-religious, religious, of different ethnicities, and I intend to run a secular council here which respects everybody, and I will not be veering from that. Thank you. Now, can we have a...
I don't agree with that.
Sorry, you cannot interject. Can I have apologies, please?
Excuse me, for those that do practice...
Councillor Paniora, you are not allowed to speak in this manner.
Now, not only was that audio terrible, it was cherry-picked. Now, here's the full version.
Newly elected members, staff, public, both here and online, to our first full KDC meeting of the new triennium. Please be reminded that this is a formal meeting and public attendees cannot interject or speak to this meeting. The first item is apologies.
Excuse me, just before we start, through the chair, may I say the karakia?
Councillor Paniora, you cannot interrupt. You cannot interrupt, I'm sorry.
Before the meeting starts, it's tinanga to start a meeting with a karakia.
Okay, I'll address that. This is a council which is full of people who are non-religious, religious, of different ethnicities, and I intend to run a secular council here which respects everybody, and I will not be veering from that. Thank you. Now, can we have a...
I don't agree with that.
Sorry, you cannot interject. Can I have apologies, please?
Excuse me, for those that do practice...
Councillor Paniora, you are not allowed to speak in this manner. We'll continue with our meeting. Apologies, please.
This does represent broader issues, and I think that that's why the hikoi is still going ahead. There were campaign sentiments, during the campaign. There were terms that were bandied about. There was anti-Māori ward sentiments, there was anti-co-governance sentiments.
Because neither are wanted in New Zealand.
So there are broader and more substantial issues at play here. The karakia is only the tip of the iceberg, and there are more substantial, more concerning things that are happening. This isn't about me anymore, though. It very much is about, our community and our people having a voice, and democracy is fundamentally about, people having the power, people having the voice.
But you have a voice. You can go in via the normal route. Now, this young lady here is a lawyer, so she can easily get elected the normal way.
And tomorrow is very much about that.
Since that council meeting, the Mayor has compromised, announcing each councillor in turn would be able to start the meeting in whichever way they wanted, but that doesn't take away the hurt. We did reach out to Mayor Jepson for a response, but we didn't receive one while going to air. So now I'm joined by Kahurangi Dame Rangimarie Nader Glavish, who will be part of this morning's hikoi. Kia ora e te Kahurangi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. What is this morning's hikoi about?
Well, it's really quite simple. The purpose of today's hikoi is to inform all racists in this country that the doctrine of discovery is over. We will no longer tolerate ignorance or arrogance.
And nor will we.
They have. Actually, no one in council has said...
They don't like the way you're going about it.
Well, actually, where I am going to push back on you here is that they have not raised issue with the management arrangements that you're raising issue with. They have not. What they have argued is, instead of having 4, should we have a few more water entities? No one, except the opposition, have said do nothing. No one.
That brings me to entrenchment. Now, Nanaia Mahuta clearly was in contravention of the Cabinet manual. When Cabinet, they said no to entrenchment around the table, Nanaia Mahuta goes into the House and agrees with entrenchment, albeit lower than the 75% that was rejected by Cabinet, but nevertheless, still entrenchment.
Well, I again disagree. We did not have an entrenchment clause in the bill. That was the decision of Cabinet.
No, you didn't, but she agreed with it. If the Cabinet manual says that if a decision is made by Cabinet, regardless of whether a minister agrees or disagrees with it, they have to go along with it. And she didn't.
I disagree. She absolutely maintained the Cabinet decision and the Cabinet position.
How did she do that then, when she spoke in favour of entrenchment, even though it was moved by another party?
I've actually seen her comments, and she speaks to both sides. The decision of Cabinet was not to put an entrenchment clause in the bill, and we did not. What's entirely separate is how you deal with individual amendments that might be made by other other parties. And in some cases, you'll have those only provided in close proximity to the debate. I've already spoken about this. You know, yes, there was an in-principle discussion around entrenchment, and entrenchment is commonly
it's constitutionally awfully important.
Yeah, it is, and it's also set at a very high bar. 75% is commonly understood to be the entrenchment principle, and therefore it doesn't pass unless you have the majority of Parliament on side for it. What became unusual here is we had something that is not similar to what we usually have for entrenchment. It was a much lower bar.
So she didn't pull the rug from beneath you. You seem to be left out, I guess, hanging on this one.
No, look.
And Nanaia Mahuta still maintained that the SOP seemed to be okay.
Here, what I'm going to say, and this is not different to anything I've said before, when mistakes are made, there's often a multitude of reasons for them.
And that's why... mistake is made by the whole party, which by proxy means that the whole Cabinet should resign because they've gone against what they agreed to in Cabinet, including yourself.
That is patently ridiculous. When a mistake is made, you accept it and fix it. That's exactly what we did. I've been in politics for 15 years. I've seen a number of occasions where errors have been made in bills. Usually, they're discovered sometime after and take a significant...
Not of such important constitutional significance.
And they take significant amount of time to fix. We identified the issue, it's been fixed, and before the bill has even passed,